Dorothy Inspires, the channel that is committed to supporting social workers. If this is your first time visiting my channel, you are most welcome. So now you've qualified as a social worker and you've decided that you want to work in adult social care. You're looking for your first job as a newly qualified social worker. You might have gone for a couple of job interviews, but you've not had any success. Please don't give up. We are going to look at some of the typical questions that you may be asked in an adult social work interview. So the first question that you may be asked in a social work interview in adult social care is, number one, what skills and qualities do you have that make you suitable for the role in which you've applied? So this question is basically asking you, why should we give you the job? What makes you stand out from the rest? Remember that it's a competitive interview and that there are other people that might have applied for the job for the same position as well. So you'd need to sell yourself to the interviewing panel. This question is specifically asking about you. What is your qualities? What is your experience? What can you bring to the table? You need to sell yourself. The question allows you to tell the interviewing panel more about you. The second question that you may be asked in a social work interview with adults is, why do you want to work for us? What has attracted you to our borough, or what has attracted you to our organisation? It's important that you reflect on this before your interview. Think about why you want to work for that particular organisation or that local authority or council. Number three, how do you prioritise your workload? How do you manage your deadlines? Social work is a profession where you will be dealing with people's lives. You will be case holding, and it can be very stressful and challenging at times. You will have a caseload of vulnerable adults and you'll be working with their carers as well in some cases. The interview panel would like to gauge your understanding of caseload work and how you can manage competing demands. Question number four. You may be asked a question about teamwork, being a team player. You may be asked a question about teamwork and multidisciplinary working. Social work is about teamwork. The teamwork question may not be asked in isolation, so it might be asked in a way that you can draw it in another answer, in an answer to another question. I hope that makes sense. Almost certainly you will be asked a question about safeguarding vulnerable adults. Something along the lines of, give an example of a safeguarding case that you might have dealt with. What did you do and what was the outcome? So you need to understand what is safeguarding vulnerable adults. You need to understand the local authority's duty to respond to a safeguarding concern. The other question you may be asked in a social work interview is, what is strengths-based social work practice? And give an example of where you might have practiced in a strengths-based way. So strength-based practice is where you focus on the individual client's strengths and what is important to them. What can they do for themselves? We can draw in support systems, support from friends and family, and so forth. So we're looking at creating independent people, supporting people's independence, rather than creating dependency. You may be asked to give an example of a mental capacity assessment that you might have completed and your understanding of what a mental capacity assessment is. You need to understand the 5 Mental Capacity Act principles and how you might have applied it in your practice. You can use your practice placement social work experience as an example. If you don't have professional experience in the field, you can draw on your social work practice placement or any work experience that you might have done. The other question that you may be asked in a social work interview is, what laws and legislation is relevant for the role in which you have applied for? So you need to look at the Care Act 2014 and the key pieces of legislation within that act. You need to look at the Mental Capacity Act 2005 and the 5 principles. You need to understand the Mental Health Act 1983. You need to understand that safeguarding is person-centered and outcome-focused, and to make sure that the client is always at the center of everything that you're doing. You need to understand the General Data Protection Regulations 2018, that's GDPR regulation. In social work, you will be handling sensitive information and sensitive data. The clients that you are supporting have every right to request for the information that you hold on your records about them. So it's really important that you have a good understanding of the data protection regulations. So I've provided you with a guide as to the typical questions that you can expect at a social work interview in adult social care. Sometimes, depending on the specific team that you're interviewing for, the questions may differ slightly. So for example, if you're interviewing for a hospital social work team, you will likely be asked questions about your experience in discharges and safe and timely discharges, etc. You will need to have an understanding of the different discharge pathways. So we have pathway 1, pathway 2 and pathway 3. If you're interviewing for a specialist team such as a mental health team, then you may be asked questions around the Mental Health Act 1983, 2007 Act and the various sections within the Act. You need to demonstrate your experience and understanding of the recovery model, Section 117 aftercare, and the care program approach, CPA. You may also require knowledge of the various sections within the Act. If you're interviewing for a learning disability and autism team, then you do need to have knowledge and understanding of this specialist area because it requires certain skills and expertise. So for example, you need to understand the difference between a learning disability and a learning difficulty. The two are sometimes used interchangeably, but actually they're two different diagnoses. The learning disabilities and autism team work with people who have a formal diagnosis of learning disability and not learning difficulty. So when you're working with this client group, you've got to adapt your communication tools and methods to suit this vulnerable group. And you need to have an understanding of their communication needs. You need to understand PECS, which is Picture Exchange Communication System. Remember that some adults with learning disabilities and autism are non-verbal or non-communicative. They will have to rely on different forms of communication in order to ensure that their needs are met appropriately. Many adults with learning disabilities and autism are physically able to manage many daily living activities, such as prepare their own meals, make a cup of hot drink, do their shopping, carry out domestic chores at home. However, they may require supervision with many of these tasks. They may struggle with multitasking, for example, and even doing some basic tasks, such as making a cup of hot drink or doing personal care tasks, may require more concentration than an adult without the disability. The Care Act 2014 and the Mental Capacity Act 2005 applies in every client group within adults that you may work in. If you're interviewing for, let's say, the referral and assessment team, intake team or first response team, so the team that work at the front door and the team who usually take incoming referrals or deal with new cases coming into the department. Because the team at the front door is very fast-paced and they don't really hold cases for long, you have to demonstrate to the interviewing panel that you have what it takes to thrive in such a fast-paced environment. If you're interviewing specifically for a team that deals with more complex work, which is usually called locality teams or complex teams, teams that deal with long-term work, then you may be asked questions specifically around your experience dealing with complex cases or managing complex cases. So this is information to enable you to explore further and do further research. Interviews are not as bad as people think. Many people are afraid of interviews and it can be quite daunting, and there's no two ways about that. But I can give you a few tips to help you to thrive in your interviews. So tip number 1, when you're being interviewed, always try and give examples to back up your answers, because in doing so, you're telling the interview panel that you understand the questions that is being asked of you. Tip number 2, please relax and remember that the people who are interviewing you are human beings just like you. They had to be interviewed for their positions as well. Just remember that. So just talk to the people, talk to them, talk to the interviewing panel about yourself. Once you enter the interview room, you need to put the nerves behind you. Now, most interviews are done virtually via Teams and Zoom anyway, so that might be less daunting for many people. Remember, look at it this way. The interview is pretty much talking to the panel about yourself and what you have been doing. Sometimes during interviews, you may be prompted a bit. So if for example, the interviewing panel, see that you're on the right track, but you might have forgotten a few things and you haven't fully answered the question, you may be prompted to enable you to answer the question in full. Thank you so much for watching me, and I trust that you have gained something from this video. Please support my channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, and leaving any comments. Stay blessed and see you in my next video. Bye bye.